John and Ed, they're on patrol, chasing shadows, heart and soul. Cryptid hunter UFO, down this rabbit hole they go. In the woods and on the street, whispers follow their heartbeat. Alien eyes, giant's feet, all got shadows they all meet. Down the rabbit hole they dive, midnight secrets start to thrive. Mysteries keep them alive. In the dark, does truth survive? Haunted houses, midnight calls, endless echoes in the halls. Ghostly murmurs, secret falls, every clue, they chase them all. Whispers follow their heartbeat. Alien eyes, giant's feet, all got shadows they all meet. Down the rabbit hole they dive, midnight secrets start to thrive. Mysteries keep them alive. In the dark, does truth survive? Haunting walls, they've got the key. Hidden fears, they set them free. Cryptid hunter, you and me. Down this rabbit hole, let's see. Unseen worlds, they've got the key. Hidden fears, they set them free. Cryptid hunter, you and me. Down this rabbit hole, let's see.
Frost crunched under my boots as we made our way through Rendlesham Forest. December the 26th, 1980, Boxing Day. And instead of nursing a hangover like any sensible squaddy, here I was at 3 AM, trudging through trees with Sergeant Peniston and Cabin Sag, investigating what looked like a downed aircraft. Christ, it's cold here. Enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey, Cabin Sag muttered, his breath forming clouds in the bitter air. I'd been stationed at RAF Woodbridge for 8 months, guarding nuclear weapons that could turn half of Europe into glass. You get used to the weight of that responsibility, the constant edge of knowing that everything you're protecting could end civilization as you know it. But nothing had prepared me for this. The lights we'd seen from the East Gate weren't like anything in our training manuals. They moved wrong, they pulsed wrong, felt wrong. As we pushed deeper into the forest, following the bearing where we'd seen them descend, the normal sounds of the Suffolk countryside just stopped. No wind, no rustling leaves. Even our radio chatter had dissolved into static. Burroughs, Peniston's voice cut through the silence, sharp with authority but tinged with something else. Uncertainty? Fear? You getting anything on the radio? I checked my handset. Nothing but white noise, like the whole electromagnetic spectrum had been scrambled. Negative, Sarge. It's like we're in a dead zone. That's when we saw it. Through the gap in the trees ahead, maybe 50 metres out, there was this glow. Not like a fire or a spotlight, but something that seemed to bend the very air around it. The light had texture, depth, like looking at the aurora borealis but concentrated into a space no bigger than a transit van. Jesus fucking Christ, Cabin Sang whispered. And for once, none of us told him to watch his language. We approached with standard tactical spacing, weapons ready but not raised. You don't point rifles at something you can't identify, especially when it might be a downed civilian aircraft. But as we got closer, it became clear this wasn't any aircraft in Jane's All the World's aircraft. The thing, and Christ knows what else to call it, was roughly triangular, but the edges seemed to shift and blur like heat haze. The surface wasn't metal, wasn't plastic, wasn't anything I could put a name to. It absorbed light in some places and reflected it in others, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. Are you getting this, Peniston? I asked, knowing he was documenting everything in his notebook. The man was meticulous, wrote down everything from equipment checks to what he had for breakfast. But Peniston wasn't writing. He was staring at the craft with this look I'd never seen before, like a man watching his entire understanding of reality crumble in real time. The temperature around us had dropped at least 10 degrees. Our breath wasn't just visible now, it was crystallising and falling like snow. The electromagnetic interference was getting worse. Our watches had stopped, and the radiation detector Peniston carried was clicking away like a bloody Geiger counter in a nuclear test site. That's when the humming started. Not mechanical humming. This was something deeper, something that seemed to resonate in your bones. It was like the forest itself was singing, a frequency just on the edge of human hearing. It made your teeth ache and your vision blur. "We need to call this in," Cabin Sag said, but his voice sounded distant, muffled, like he was speaking from underwater. I tried the radio again, still nothing. We were completely cut off from the base, alone in the forest with something that had no business existing. The craft, because what else was he going to call it, began to shift. The glow intensified and I could swear I saw movement inside it, shadows that moved with purpose and intelligence. The humming grew louder, and with it came something else, a sensation like being watched, examined, studied. Peniston took a step forward. "Sarge, I don't think that's it," I started, but he held up a hand. "I have to," he said, and his voice had this weird, dreamy quality. "I have to know." He approached the craft like a man in a trance. When he reached out to touch its surface, the whole bloody thing lit up like Christmas morning. Symbols appeared on its hull, not carved or painted, but flowing like liquid light across the surface. Ancient-looking hieroglyphs mixed with mathematical equations I couldn't begin to understand. The moment Peniston's gloved hand made contact, everything changed. The humming stopped, the electromagnetic interference vanished, our radios crackled back to life, our watches started ticking again, but the craft began to lift. Not with engines or rotors or any kind of propulsion system we could identify, it simply rose, silent as smoke, the glow beneath it intensifying until the forest floor was bright as daylight. We threw ourselves flat as it passed overhead, and I felt this tingling sensation across my entire body, like being caught in an electrical storm. When I looked up, it was gone, vanished into the night sky without so much as a whisper. We lay there in the suddenly normal forest for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When we finally got to our feet, Peniston was different. His eyes had the distant look, like he was seeing something the rest of us couldn't. Some call it a 1,000-yard stare. "Did you get the markings?" I asked him. "The symbols?" He nodded slowly, tapping his notebook. "Every one, but John," he paused, looking at me with something approaching pity. "I don't think we're supposed to remember this. Not all of it." He was right, of course. By the time we made it back to base, the details were already starting to blur. The craft became lights through the trees, the symbols became scratches in the bark, the electromagnetic effects became equipment malfunction. But I knew what I'd seen. We all did. The official report would mention unexplained lights, possible aircraft, normal explanations. The investigators who came later would find rabbit holes and lighthouse beams and perfectly rational explanations for everything. They'd missed the most important detail of all. 3 days after our encounter, I found Peniston in the base library, surrounded by books on ancient civilizations, quantum physics, and theoretical mathematics. His notebook was open to the page where he'd recorded the symbols, but now it was covered in ones and zeros. Binary code that seemed to stretch on forever. What is it?" I asked. He looked at me with those same distant eyes and smiled. Not a happy smile, but the smile of a man carrying knowledge too heavy to bear. "Coordinates," he said simply. "Instructions. A message." "From whom?" "That's the question, isn't it?" He closed the notebook and looked out the window towards Rendlesham Forest. "But I don't think it matters who sent it. What matters is that we received it. I never found out what those coordinates led to. Official policy relocated both Peniston and me to different bases within 6 months. We lost touch, as military friendships often do when the service scatters you to the winds. But sometimes, on a cold December night, like this one 45 years ago, I find myself looking up at the stars and wondering if that message was ever delivered. If somewhere out there, others are looking back and wondering if we're ready for what comes next. There you go, pure science fiction masquerading as eyewitness testimony, that kind of dramatic nonsense that sells books and fills cinema seats but doesn't hold up to 5 minutes of proper investigation. Notice how convenient it all is, the electromagnetic effects, the mysterious symbols, the memory suppression. It's like someone took every UFO cliche from the past 30 years and threw them into the blender. That's the story the believers want you to swallow whole. But here's the thing. Reality is usually far more interesting than fiction, and considerably more complex than aliens did it. So now I've given you the Hollywood version, let's dive into what actually happened in those Suffolk woods, and why the truth is far more fascinating than any alien fairy tale. Ed, you ready to separate fact from fantasy? Well, are you ready, Ed? Are you ready?
I am ever ready, Eddie, as I used to get teased at school. I'm always ready to talk about conspiracies, especially Rendlesham, because that's, I mean, it's colloquially known as the British Roswell.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it is one of those fascinating cases because you've just got all of the, I mean, it is kind of all the UFO lore chucked into a blender, but it's still, there are still, I mean, I don't know. There's just something about it that has always niggled at me.
Right, okay. So welcome one and all. Welcome chat room. Julie, a special mechanic, beats and tapes. Darlene John, Nick Torides. My goodness, we've got a full house tonight. Paul Armstrong. Who else? Ray, Mark Andrew, Chapman. Good grief, we've got a full house. Looking good. That's good to see you all. And remember, you want to keep these shows ad free. Drop a donation at some point or another, and I'll not put ads on. There's no ads on tonight. I don't know why we don't have Shalini. She's the one that's always moaning about them. But I prefer it when there's no ads because obviously then you don't have to keep winding back and getting behind and things. So let's get into it. So, as always, joining me tonight as we go into it is Ed the Techie. How you doing, Ed?
I'm pretty good, thanks. I'm on the non-alcoholic beverages this evening due to being out on antibiotics, but apart from that, I'm doing all right.
Okay, shall we get into our script? You want to kick off with your bit?
Yeah, that's okay. So we are talking about probably the most documented UFO case in British history, which is the Rendlesham Forest incident of December 1980.
Yep, Britain's Roswell, they call it, though knowing how Roswell turned out, it's not exactly filling me with a lot of confidence, but fair play, Ed. This one's got military witnesses, official documentation, and more drama than River City, the Glasgow soap opera.
That's exactly why it's fascinating. We've got Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt making audio recordings in real time, multiple US Air Force personnel as witnesses, radiation readings, physical traces. It's got everything.
Yeah, but hold on. Let's not get too far ahead because we've also got other things like the Orfordness Lighthouse flashing away every 5 seconds. Bloody great meteor that nobody mentions that went across the sky that night. And what also appears to be a classic case of expectation bias. But let's start at the beginning and see where the evidence takes us.
So the beginning is December 1980, which it should be worth mentioning that it's the height of the Cold War. So tensions were heightened, as we say.
Always high.
We've got, absolutely. We've got two USF. Oh, the other thing to bear in mind is that I think nukes were stored at Rendlesham at the US Air Force Base there as well. So
yeah,
it's a very sensitive area. But there are two US Air Force bases in Suffolk, RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge. Both house nuclear weapons, and Rendlesham Forest sits right between them sits right between them and the coast.
It does indeed. Oh, I'm pouring my wine. And here's where it gets interesting from a security. I've lost the ability to speak, Ed. I may be getting. I thought I was getting abducted the other night, but I'll tell you about that in a minute. Right, so the and this is where it gets interesting, because this is guarded by highly trained personnel. You know, not just your regular Scotties or our RAF regiment or whatever. You've got people that are responsible for guarding nuclear weapons. So you've kind of got the cream of the cream, cream of the cream, cream of the crop. And when they report something unusual, you would expect it to be taken seriously.
Well, that's always been one of my things that's fascinated me about this project, about this particular case, because we're talking about quality witnesses. We're not just talking about random Joe Bloggs walking his dog. Anyway, 5 miles east, you got a massive secret radar installation at Orfordness.
Yeah.
And they'd been running Cobra Mist.
Cobra Mist. That's a cracking
Which
name.
was,
we did an episode on that as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great name.
Yeah.
But that was an experimental over-the-horizon radar system that could pump out 10 megawatts of power, which is ridiculously large for a radar system.
Yeah, and I mean, Cobra Mist is a great thing, but we did cover it. And Cobra Mist was shut down in 1973. That's 7 years before this incident. I've got to grant you, though, the site was still active with the BBC World Service transmissions. So they were using it, but not at the kind of megawattage that would have been used in the radar station thing. So we have to be careful about connecting dots that aren't quite there, don't we?
Absolutely. But you also have to think about the electromagnetic environment. Decades of high-power experiments, ongoing radio transmissions, and reports of, even today, of equipment malfunctioning in Orfordness, that these things don't just, I don't think you just switch them off. We can switch them off, but I think that they leave a permanent electromagnetic imprint.
You might have something there. I mean, I can't fault that reasoning, because if you're pumping that kind of energy into an area, who's to say that there isn't residuals around? Yeah. It depends what we're getting, though, what we're getting coming back. I mean, the people are just saying, you know, like, my camera battery died. It's not exactly compelling evidence of alien visitation, is it? So what actually happened on that night? So 3 a.m. on Boxing Day, 1980, the security patrol near the east gate of RAF Woodbridge spots lights descending into the forest. Classic opening to a UFO story.
3 airmen, Sergeant Jim Penniston, Airman John Burrows, and Airman Ed Cabanzag, are sent to investigate what they think might be a downed aircraft.
And now, this is where it gets a bit different, because from an investigative standpoint, when these guys gave their statements in 1997, remember, 17 years later, they told a very different story than what ultimately became the legend.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Airman Cabanzag said, and I quote, "We figured the lights were coming from past the forest, since nothing was visible when we passed through the woody forest. We would see it glowing near the beacon light, and that'll be the beacon light for the airport. But as we got closer, we found it to be a lit up farmhouse."
Hang on a minute, that's not the story everybody knows.
No, it certainly isn't. And it gets even better. John Burrows stated, "We could see a beacon going round, so we went towards it. We followed it for about 2 miles before we could see it was coming from a lighthouse." And that's the Orfordness Lighthouse, to be specific.
So what you're saying is that the original witnesses actually identified the lighthouse themselves?
Mm-hmm. In their statements in 1997, yeah. But here's the rub. They didn't publish these statements until 1997. And by then, you know, the story had taken on arms and legs. It had a legend of its own. At 4 a.m. on December the 26th, local Suffolk police were called. Their report? The only lights visible were those from the Orfordness Lighthouse, several miles away on the coast, Your Honour.
Yeah, but something must have happened to generate all the attention. I mean, as far as I know, there were physical traces that were found the next day. And the accounts directly after what happened, because I mean, there's a big difference between talking about something that happened 17 years ago and talking about something that happened a day ago or 2 days ago.
Yeah, you're right. And people were sent out to investigate it. And in fact, as we'll come to, the base commander went out, I think, the next night. But there were 3 small impressions in a triangular pattern, allegedly. There were burn marks on trees, there were broken branches.
That sounds pretty compelling to me. I heard about radiation as well.
Yeah, it does sound compelling, but does it? Because when the police examined the marks at 10:30 on December the 26th, PC Brian Cresswell assessed them as likely made by animals. Mind you, who's to say that he is or is not a native Indian trapper and tracker that's been brought over for this? But yeah, I mean, I don't know how many cops would say, well, likely made by animal. Well, I mean, okay, you know what? If you live in the country, you probably know. But I don't know. Vince Thurkettle, there's a name and a half, a forestry worker who saw them firsthand, said they were irregular in shape and didn't form a symmetrical triangle. Okay. And let's face it, any 3 marks anywhere are going to form a triangle. You know, you just can't avoid that unless you put them all in a line. He recognised them as rabbit diggings that were several months old. Now I mean, he's a forestry worker, and he says, yeah, these are rabbit diggings, and you know they've been there for a while.
I'd be more inclined to trust a forestry worker than a PC.
Yeah.
And I mean, also likely made by animals. Okay, Mr. PC Smarty Pants, what animals?
Well, rabbits.
And also, what about the burn marks? Because there was burn marks as well. Well,
again, we're told by the forestry, I believe, that these were axe cuts on the bark to mark the trees that were ready for felling. And that is standard forestry practice. Sometimes the simplest explanations are the right ones.
Yeah, but then we get to December the 28th, which is where things start to get really interesting. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, the deputy base commander, conducts his own investigation and makes the famous audio recordings. Yep.
So he goes out with his tape recorder, doesn't he, and does that. And that's pretty good because it's real-time documentation, and he's given it there and then as it is recorded. So no false memories, no embellishment years later, but just exactly what he's observing as it happens.
Yeah, and he's recording radiation readings, describing flashing lights, observing starlight objects moving in impossible ways.
Yes, he is, but let's break it down properly. The radiation readings showed 0.07 millirotogens per hour at the supposed landing site versus 0.03 to 0.04 in the surrounding area.
Yeah, but that's nearly double the background radiation.
Yes, it is. But they also, in doing control samples, found similar readings half a mile away from the site. So when your anomalous readings are scattered all over the shop, does that not suggest that there's a natural variation in the background radiation and not contamination from exotic craft?
Maybe, but what about the flashing lights? Holt describes it as appearing like an eye winking at you.
Yeah, and that's where we can do some proper detective work. So the light flashed every 5 seconds, and that is exactly matching the Orfordness Lighthouse. The bearing Halt recorded, 110 to 120 degrees from the site, points directly at the bloody lighthouse.
Yeah, but surely an experienced military officer would recognise the difference between a lighthouse and something else.
You would think so, Ed, and you're bang on in that assumption. But Ian Redpath, a researcher who really cracked this case, he went out there and demonstrated that from the elevated forest position, the lighthouse beam appears to hover just a few feet above ground level. And as you move through the trees, it seems to move with you.
That's kind of creepy when you think about it.
Yeah, well, especially if you're grubbing about in the dark, isn't it?
And it's cold.
Yeah.
And I guess you've been woken up or you've been sent out into this environment and told to expect something. And I guess the natural human tendency to amplify things, particularly if it's in the dark and all of that kind of thing, could potentially make you think that something like that was indeed some sort of alien craft.
Well, absolutely, because when you're told to go out and look for something extraordinary, aren't you going to put extraordinary, interpretations on what might, in the cold light of day, just be ordinary things?
Okay, so what about the star-like objects to the north and south?
Those starlight objects were most likely stars. Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, was perfectly positioned to the south, and on a clear December night with atmospheric conditions causing scintillation, I like that word, that's a nice word, bright stars can appear to move and pulse.
Yeah, but Holt was using military equipment, image intensifiers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, he was, and that's exactly the big problem, because they can make the effect worse. Because they're taking in all the available light, putting it through their image intensifier, which is basically an algorithm, and you know how good they can be, especially in 1980. And then you've got trying to focus binoculars on a star. They just dance around like mad. I mean, have you ever looked at a star through binoculars? It looks like a water globe, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So, next we get to the official response and cover-up claims. And that's where the conspiracy theorists really get going. Lieutenant Colonel Halt submits his official memo to the Ministry of Defence. I should probably call him Lieutenant, shouldn't I? Is he English? No,
he's an American. He was an American.
No, so it's Lieutenant, not Lieutenant.
Lieutenant, right. Yeah.
But he submitted his official memo to the Ministry of Defence, but there's radio silence from the government.
There is. Well, not quite radio silence. So the MOD did investigate, kind of, sort of, Their conclusion was no threat to national security, therefore no further investigation required.
Yeah, which is exactly what you'd expect them to say if they were covering something up.
and is it not exactly what you'd expect them to say if there was nothing to cover up?
Well, yeah.
So David Clark, the journalist, has done more digging into this than anyone. Got hold of the mod files when they were released in 2001. And you know what he found?
So you really think our classified documents are going to reveal the truth?
No. Internal correspondence and responses to public inquiries. No evidence of any in-depth investigation. And that's quite telling, because the mod really didn't do anything. They didn't do any investigation because they didn't really think there was anything to investigate. And, that's kind of, I would say that's a kind of fault, wouldn't you? Really? Shouldn't they have, these nuclear weapons here, right? You should have looked at it from all angles, even if it wasn't aliens. It might have been a Russian cell or something, sizing the place up, or even, Greenham Common peace protesters looking to sabotage something. So really, they should have been all over this, shouldn't they?
But that's one of the things that I've always found really interesting about this case, is exactly what you said, that you have some sort of incident, even if you finally write it off thinking this is all just guys seeing lighthouses and animal tracks or whatever, because of the sensitivity of the location. We're talking about 2 American bases that both have nuclear weapons stored. You would think that they would at least do some sort of more formal, thorough investigation. But what about the base commander's response?
Yeah, Ted Conrad. Get cracking names, these Americans, didn't it? He was pretty scathing. In 2010, he said, "We saw nothing that resembled Lieutenant Colonel Halt's descriptions, either in the sky or on the ground. We had people in position to validate Halt's narrative, but none of them could."
So his superiors are basically calling him a liar.
Yeah, Conrad went even a bit further. He said Halt should be ashamed and embarrassed by his allegation that his country and the UK both conspired to deceive their citizens over this issue.
Wow, that's got a big falling out between military officers.
Yeah. So let's move on to something that often gets overlooked. That initial sighting at 3 a.m. on December the 26th, there was a bloody great fireball meteor streaking across southern England at exactly that time.
You're joking.
I didn't know about this. I only found it out when we started digging into this because, I mean, we both looked at Rendlesham in a cursory manner and thought, you know, it's a British Roswell and all that. But I didn't realise there was a meteor going across the place at the same time. And you know, the British Astronomical Association documented it, observed it at 2050 UTC, give or take 5 minutes. And witnesses described it as bright as the gibbous moon. These things frequently generate UFO reports because they look like they're landing nearby, you know, with a big curve over.
So what we're saying is we think the original trigger for sending the guys out could have been a natural phenomenon, i.e. meteor.
Yeah, I think so. Meteor creates the initial alert. Lighthouse provides the ongoing stimulus. The guys go through the woods looking for this beacon that keeps flashing at them and then find it's an actual freaking lighthouse. Bright stars, atmospheric effects. You know, you fill the gaps in, mate. You don't need little green men when you've got atmospheric conditions and physics.
Okay, so what about Jim Penniston's binary code?
Yeah, okay. And this is truly, this is where we start to devolve into, in my view, the area of fantasy, because we're now in the trust me bro types thing. So it's 30 years after the event. In 2010, Penniston suddenly reveals he received binary code telepathically when touching the craft. 16 pages of ones and zeros that decode the coordinates for ancient mystical sites. And
yeah, that does sound a bit convenient. I mean, I always thought that this is in the same way that there have been aspects to this story that I found really compelling. There's also aspects to this story that I find a bit mental, and this is one of them.
Yeah, it's not only convenient, mate. It's complete fucking bollocks, isn't it? I mean, 30 years later, you've had plenty of time and the internet to catch up on where things are, write out the codes and get them translated into binary. Oh, look, it has come back to me after 30 years because they made us forget at the time. So he didn't mention it in any of the contemporary reports. He didn't reveal it through decades of interviews and debriefings. It's either classic false memory syndrome or he's mixed it in with a dash of attention-seeking grift. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, the attention-seeking grift, trying to make some money out of it. I can't say I blame him. I just don't find it very credible.
So, from an investigative perspective, mate, what have we got? What have we actually got here?
Well, when you lay it all out like that, it's starting to look less like alien visitation and more like a perfect storm of circumstances and coincidences.
It does seem to be. A bright meteor triggers the initial response. Security teams investigate, expecting to find a crashed aircraft. The lighthouse beam, viewed from an unusual angle and under expectation bias, appears anomalous. Atmospheric conditions make stars dance about. Rabbit holes get misidentified as landing gear impressions.
Yeah, but we still go back to the fact that the witnesses were trained military personnel.
Yeah.
That you would think that they would understand the difference between atmospheric conditions making stars dance around and lighthouses and something more anomalous.
Yeah, and 100% behind you. But remember, what you've got here is their statements aren't coming out until 17 years later. So in all that time, the people have been making up stories, right? Not them. I'm not saying they're making up stories, but what's happened is people have made up stories about what happened, and then their official statements are released, and they bear no relation to what the legend has become. I mean, they've got a fucking monument. That thing that I used in the video, that bit of metal, that's sitting on the ground at a sign that says UFO Trail in Rendlesham Forest today. They're making an industry out of it. So, I mean, like we said, they're human, you know? And they've had 17 years of the public and the press and everybody interviewing them and embellishing things, and maybe they just start believing their own fucking legend, you know?
Well, it takes us back to last week's rabbit hole, where you have a town that they still have parades, and the Flatwood Monster is kind of part of the town's local economy.
Yeah.
But I'm always disappointed when there's no aliens, because it would be fun just once to come across one of these stories and just not be able to debunk it.
Yeah. The thing that gets me, right, and is that it's too easy. You know? Because what you initially think is a really fucking compelling case with good class witnesses, you know, military grade witnesses. You've had the police there as well. You've had good professional witnesses. And things have been twisted around. And I don't know, I mean, was what's his name, Halt? Was he pissed? He didn't go out until 2 days later. He went out on the 28th. You know, I just don't know. I just say compelling narratives emerge from the intersection of unusual circumstances, human psychology, and cultural expectations. It's modern folklore in the making, and that's exactly what we had here, isn't it?
Yeah, but what about the electromagnetic angle from Orfordness? I mean, even just on the basis that, well, even if we say that that's maybe part of why they made the mistake, perhaps some sort of, I don't know, maybe the electromagnetic energy messed with their brains or something.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say, actually, because it could. It certainly could have messed with our radio communications. Yeah. Because, you know, let's say if the BBC were using it and they just happened to hit a frequency or something that messed up the radios, or they got into the path of a particularly strong piece of bandwidth or whatever, and it just wiped out the radio for a few minutes. That's possible. But like you said, the electromagnetic radiation can have an effect on people's mood. You know, you can put magnets on your head and give yourself religious experiences and things like that, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you can give yourself a religious experience, you could give yourself a UFO encounter potentially as well.
It's pretty much the same. Well, I'm not meaning to degrade or denigrate anyone's religion, but it's pretty much the same thing, you know. At this moment in time, as far as I'm concerned, until someone parks one on the White House lawn, you know, believing in God and believing in a UFO is pretty much the same thing, because we don't have any conclusive evidence for either. What we do have is high power transmissions, temperature inversions, perfect recipes for optical effects, lighthouses that are shining lights at the right fucking height to look like they're shining through they're floating across the ground. It's a masterclass in how extraordinary stories emerge from ordinary events when filtered through human perception and expectation.
Yeah, I have to say, when you break it down like that, the conventional explanation actually makes more sense than the extraterrestrial visitation explanation. Although I have sometimes wondered whether it was some sort of experimental craft that maybe went a bit awry and landed somewhere where it shouldn't, and they had to hastily cover it up. I mean, what about the fact that they separated the guys that were involved in it and moved them to other bases? But then that did take 6 months, so it wasn't like they did it the next day.
Yeah, that happens anyway. But the thing is, Ed, if that had happened, wouldn't there have been like trucks and activity, and you know, it's not exactly in the middle of nowhere. It's Suffolk, you know.
And they probably wouldn't want people going there, like journalists and stuff like that, either.
Exactly. Yeah.
They,
So I think we're back to, this is what we're trying to do, guys. We're trying to do proper investigations. So we're trying to follow evidence and take it, for it to take us where it leads, not where you want it to go. And that's the difference, because, it's great to want to believe, and I think both Ed and I do want to believe. The problem is we need the evidence to make us believe, or to allow us to believe. We're not going to just jump on every single little thing. You're not going to get Louis Elizondo type stuff from us showing you pictures of chandeliers and saying there's a fucking UFO, So the truth is going to be less exciting than actual aliens, but in some respects, it's more interesting when you can work these things out. Yeah.
well, it's interesting. I mean, I find the conversations around UFOs fascinating. Again, because there are some that are more convincing than others. I think. I don't know. There is still a tiny part of me that wonders about this one, and probably always will.
So what does the chat room think? What you guys got? Danny and John says that there would be residual effects. Yeah, there would be. The other thing, I suppose, is I don't know. Well, you would hate to think that they were losing bits of nuclear weapons, to account for the increased radiation.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it was the 80s.
I don't know. Maybe because the thing is that they were missiles or like cruise missiles or something. I mean, they didn't have silos or anything like that, and the nuclear weapons that are stored are most likely stored extremely securely. But it's probably bombs and stuff that you'd put on aircraft, isn't it?
Yeah. It's, what we got? Ray said he reckons there might be granite in the area, high radon. That's a possibility, because that could account for the different variation in the background radiation. I mean, you go to Aberdeen, and I think you're going to get like 3 times the dose you would living in any other part of Scotland, because Aberdeen's built what's called the Granite City, isn't it? So it's built on top of granite.
And 0.3 to 0.7 of the milliroentgens.
Millirotogens, yeah.
I think it's Roentgens.
Roentgens, okay.
I think.
I bow to your superior Dutch knowledge.
Yeah, but that's not. I mean, it's not a huge amount. I mean, if we're talking, that to me is perfectly within the scope of background radiation when you actually stop and think about it. I mean, yes, it's double the background value, but the background value is pretty low to start with. So,
yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. What else have we got to cover? Was there anything else in the report?
No. Do we have anything else that you sent me? Let's have a quick look, because you did send me a bit of documentation. I mean, the fact that this stuff comes out 17 years later.
Yeah.
And also, it's 1997, and you have to remember that 1997 was peak X-Files, peak UFOs, peak. There was, I mean, I loved that time period, because there was huge amounts of science fiction on TV, and the X-Files was running as well, and it's difficult to underestimate how popular that show was, and how much of this I want to believe stuff that actually put into the zeitgeist. But it also brings it to the fore. So you have these former US service personnel who maybe think they could make a bit of extra money by talking about this creepy incident that happened in Rendlesham Forest. So yeah, it's, as much as you want to believe in the little green men, you do have to maintain a certain skepticism. I mean, that's what we try and do on the show. It's not just about diving down the rabbit hole and believing everything that you come across.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Just looking to see if there's any we've missed. There's a picture of the craft, which is pretty poor. You know, they've recreated on the forest floor.
Yeah, I struggle because I read something about there being. I mean, there's the footprints that they recognise as animal markings of some description.
Yeah.
Wasn't there flattened grass or burnt grass that didn't grow back or something like that?
I'm not sure. 2003, former USAF military policeman Kevin Cond claimed responsibility for creating strange lights using modified police car lights as a practical joke. I could imagine that could happen, yeah. We used to do practical jokes all the time.
I mean, especially in 1980.
Yeah. A 2018 theory suggested the SAS staged the entire incident as revenge against the USAF following a security exercise. But the researcher David Clark concluded this story was itself a hoax. The skeptical researcher Brian Dunning's comprehensive analysis concluded that without exception, everything that Halt reported on his audio tape and in his written memo has a perfect, rational, and unremarkable explanation. Dunning emphasised that separate pieces of poor evidence do not aggregate into good evidence. I like that. It's a nice. It's got a nice ring about it. Yeah,
that's true.
Warning against pattern matching that connects unrelated phenomena. Yeah, I mean that's true. That's like seeing the face of Jesus in a rap. You know.
Mm-hmm.
The Rendlesham incident has achieved legendary status comparable to other cultural mysteries like the Loch Ness Monster. Well, I remember the surgeon's photograph. That turned out to be a fucking hoax, didn't it? Or King Arthur. Forestry Commission capitalised on public interest by creating an official UFO trail in 2005, complete with informational markers and a metallic sculpture representing the alleged craft.
Yeah, and if you look at the pictures of that sculpture, I mean, obviously, and it was the kind of floaty thing that you had in the video, but there's a good picture of it out there.
Yeah.
It's a bit small to be some sort of interdimensional craft.
Unless the aliens are teeny, teeny, tiny people.
Well, that's...
Or a drone.
Maybe it was some sort of advanced alien drone. I mean, it might account for the size.
Yeah.
But this idea that what's his name touched it, and then years later he starts getting these visions of binary and stuff. I mean, wasn't that binary translated? It was just essentially gobbledygook.
Well, it says it. I think it did point to coordinates like Göbekli Tepe and things like that. But by that point, everybody had already found these things. Interesting on Peniston though, because he did develop Meniere's disease. However, medical analysis indicates that these conditions are inconsistent with radiation exposure patterns, and the US Veterans Administration found no evidence linking health issues to the Rendlesham incident.
Yeah, but they would say that, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah, okay. See, this is the problem. If you're going to say, you know, in the face of no evidence, and you say, well, they would say that, then we're at an impasse, aren't we?
Well, yeah.
You know what? But we're back to Carl Sagan, aren't we? Because if you're going to make an extraordinary claim, you got to back it up. You know, and we're not making an extraordinary claim here. What we're doing is we're saying there are rational explanations for this extraordinary claim. So unless you've got...
extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
They do. Yeah, they do.
And if it's... The thing is, you can pick apart all of the different aspects of the case, and actually there's there's a logical explanation. I mean, if there'd been no lighthouse,
Yeah.
then, I mean, if you take any one of the rational bits definitively out of the story, like the lighthouse, if that lighthouse hadn't been there,
Yep, exactly.
then you might be more inclined to believe it. But when you can explain each aspect of what they saw based on mundane and conventional example of reasons, then yeah, I think it's best to go off and find another rabbit hole to explore.
There's some interesting stuff on the Cobra Mist side of things. So military research has documented how plasma sheaths can drastically affect radar cross-sections and electromagnetic wave propagation. When radar frequencies interact with ionized plasma, they can cause either scattering or absorption depending on electron collision frequencies. This creates complex electromagnetic environments that can produce unexpected radar signatures. Now
This is one of the things about hypersonic missiles.
Yeah.
The hypersonics, for example, the Oreshnik,
Yeah.
that the Russians have, that because they move so fast, they actually create this ball of plasma around the thing, which is one of the reasons they're very difficult to shoot down.
You know what else creates balls of plasma around them because they're moving so freaking fast? Meteors.
True.
So, high-power radio frequency fields can produce auditory effects through microwave heating, where short, strong electromagnetic pulses are perceived as sounds due to thermoelastic tissue expansion in the brain. Holy shit, that sounds fucking worrying. So is that the hum? While this requires specific pulse characteristics, it demonstrates how electromagnetic fields can create sensory experiences. Jeez.
Well, I mean, if you go near an electrical substation or high-powered lines, you can get that hum in the background.
Mm-hmm. You do, and you're not allowed. What is it, 500 meters or something? You're not allowed to build houses within 500 meters of high-power transmission lines or substations.
Absolutely.
So modern visitors to Orfordness report that electrical equipment malfunctions on the site, with batteries quickly draining, computer monitors flickering before failing, and cameras refusing to work until back on the mainland. This suggests lingering electromagnetic anomalies, exactly what you suggested earlier. Though the reporting source notes their own equipment worked normally during the visit. There you go.
Yeah, and I mean, it might wear off over time. It might just be in specific areas, like near.
It might be temperature dependent as well, because you'll have different atmospheric conditions depending on the temperature, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, there's lots of different things that will impact it.
Yeah. Right. So what's the Cornwall there? The annual radiation dose is 7.8 millisieverts, which is more than 3 times the UK average. There you go, Ray. Yeah. Nectaridus, he blames the Russians. Ray says it was Putin back when he was a taxi driver.
Well, I mean, I think Putin is. Yeah, I mean, Putin.
No, I think Putin was in Berlin in the 80s, wasn't he?
He was a taxi driver for a while.
Was he? Well,
yeah, but
before or after he joined the KGB?
I think it was after. I think it might have been after the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah. So in the 80s, Putin was in the KGB, wasn't he?
Well, that was definitely Putin, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, he's probably trying to infiltrate one of the American bases and gather secret information about their nuclear missiles or something.
Yeah. Quite a lot of stuff here on Cobra Mist. Yeah, I think it does, as it says here, Orfordness's electromagnetic history adds an intriguing dimension to the Rendlesham case. It more likely contributed to the environmental conditions that made conventional explanations, lighthouse, atmospheric effects, bright stars, appear more unusual rather than creating genuinely anomalous phenomena. Site's legacy as a centre for cutting-edge electromagnetic research and its continued radio operations could have enhanced atmospheric conditions that made normal stimuli appear extraordinary to witnesses expecting to investigate a crashed aircraft. Yeah. So ultimately, I think it's a bust. I'm quite disappointed in it because until you find these things out, you think there might be something in it, but when you really start digging into it, it's not that convincing.
No, but it's convincing on the surface, which is why I think the story endures so much. And it is a bit like Roswell in the sense that it sort of entered the pantheon, the zeitgeist, as it were. But yeah, I mean, when you actually stop and you look at each of the component parts, you look at the people involved, you look at the timings, all of that stuff. Unfortunately, you do kind of come away with the conclusion that it was essentially just a series of coincidences that may well have been a bit scary for the guys on the night, and sort of you combine all of them together, and it's dark and it's cold, and
and they're probably half cut or hung over from Christmas, because this is the day after Christmas, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing. It's I mean, chances are that they were on the sherries or the beers or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's just a result of a major hangover.
Yeah. Quite an interesting one though, and quite worth the quite worth the investigation. I think it's, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I did enjoy it. I did enjoy the digging around into this one.
It is a fascinating one to look into, because it is so. I mean, it's a fairly common one, certainly amongst UFO researchers. That we couldn't really. We'd never done an actual show on Rendlesham itself, so I think it was definitely worth doing the show.
Yeah, no, I think it was. And you know what was also worth doing, people? Dropping a like. 3 likes. 11 people on concurrent and 3 likes. Come on. Play the game. Play the game, people. And remember, if you would like to support this channel, you can always drop us something at sergeantgrumpy.com on Ko-fi. You can go to sergeantgrumpy.com, the website, where you'll find all the information, the research report that we produced for this, like we did for last week's Flatwood Monster, as a companion piece. So I'll put that up tomorrow. Tomorrow night we'll be back with All In, which is always is a required cathartic part of Friday evening.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's even, I mean, I didn't think, I don't know, each week I think it couldn't possibly be any more crazy next week, and it's always more crazy next week. I mean, by this time tomorrow, we could well have some sort of idiotic attack by America on Iran, which would be really stupid. I hope not.
And did you see Ursula making her speech today? Oh my God!
I try very hard not to listen to her.
Yeah, you're quite right not to, mate. You're quite right not.
She hurts my brain. It's like listening to Keir Starmer. I can't. I rely on other commentators telling me what they said, because I mean, or I'll watch it, but I'll watch the video of them giving the speech that's got subtitles, and I turn the sound off.
Yeah.
And I just read the subtitles for as long as I can stand it, because their voices just, I mean, both of them. But even Macron, they're just so, I don't know, it's like Starmer is definitely like nails on a chalkboard.
None of them are orators. And, you know, I'm not an Obama fan, right? But the guy had a good way about him when he was delivering a speech. You know, I mean, he could stand there and he could orate. You know, you could sit and listen to him. And I'm not a Clinton fan, but you could sit and listen to Clinton as well in his day. I don't think now he can barely walk now, judging by what I saw earlier. But Bill's getting quite old now, mind you. But yeah, I mean, Bill Clinton was
He
quite
also
an
lives with
impressive.
Hillary, which must take freaking years off your life on its own.
That's true. But he was quite a speaker in the day. So yeah. But hey, there we go. Anything else? Bill has whiskey nose. I don't believe you. Oh yeah, you can't really. I don't think you can, mate. You can understand where he got that from. I mean, imagine living with that bulbit. I remember hearing a story about Hillary once, and it was they stopped for petrol in some Shitsville, Arkansas, or whatever, when he'd just been made governor, I think. They stopped for petrol, and he was filling the car up, and she went in to pay for it. And the guy goes, "Oh, you guys just got elected. You know, Bill just got elected governor. Well done, well done." And he said to Hillary, "You must be really proud." And she goes, If he hadn't been elected governor, I'd have dumped him and married someone else. I made him what he is today."
She's awful. There was a story about Hillary back in the 70s, I think. She was because she was trained as a lawyer, and she was working for a senator who was on the Warren Commission.
Yeah.
And he sacked her because he said she was one of the most dishonest people he'd ever encountered.
Yeah. Well, have you watched the movie with Tom Cruise in it? That one where he plays the pilot guy, the Iran-Contra affair.
Yeah.
That's a good movie, and remember they were flying into Bill Clinton's Arkansas.
Yeah, Mena in Arkansas.
Yep.
I mean, I've also heard stories that Bill Clinton's an illegitimate Rothschild as well.
He's got that look about him, hasn't he?
Oh, not Rothschild, Rockefeller.
All right. He's got that look about him as well. The Rothschilds and Rockefellers are actually quite similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyway, this is kind of all in stuff that
we're we'll save this for tomorrow.
So remember and pay a visit to Snarky Cinema. You get it at snarky-cinema on YouTube. Because that's where I do all the movie reviews now. So the Tuesday night review that you would normally get here has now been moved to Snarky Cinema. And there's a whole season of Star Wars reviews being done because I'm going through all Star Wars. So I've already done Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and I've just put up Andor Season 1. I've got Andor Season 2 done, and Rogue One, and then we're into, because I'm doing them in order, chronological order, not the way they were published. And then we'll be into A New Hope. So, yeah, go and have a look. I went to the pictures. I was dragged to the pictures, or the movies, or the cinema, or whatever you want to call it. We call it going to the pictures in Scotland, because we still consider them moving pictures rather than. Anyway, so I get dragged to the pictures to watch the live action remake of How to Train Your Dragon yesterday, which was interesting. And I think I've written a review. I've half written a review on it because I had some thoughts last night, so I stayed up a little bit later and scribbled them down, lest I forget, because you know what it's like as you get older. I just forget what I'm doing sometimes. Like you open the fridge and go, why am I at the fridge and what am I looking for?
That happens with frightening regularity.
Yeah. So anyway, it was quite interesting. And I won't spoil it for you, but Gerard Butler is in it. And it's quite surprising when you're sitting in a cinema in the town that he was born and brought up in, and you're thinking, if you tried to talk to that here, mate, somebody would fucking rip your head off. It's the worst Scottish accent I've ever heard from a Scotsman. It's even worse than Sean Connery's.
Yeah. As an Englishman, I don't think it's my place to comment on Scottish accents.
Well, you can comment on them when they're doing the mid-Atlantic thing where they're toning them down so people can understand them better.
Oh, I hate that mid. I mean, no, don't get me started on the mid-Atlantic accent.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's like half American or half Canadian and half English, and they trying to sound upper crust of both. It's just like, oh no, shut up.
So anyway, I think that's us. We've done an hour for this evening. I hope you've enjoyed it, people out there. I certainly enjoyed it.
Me too. It's fun.
I quite enjoyed making my little story. I hope you enjoyed the story. I know Beats and Tates usually enjoys them. He hasn't commented tonight. Oh no, he did. He commented earlier saying that it was a good one. So thank you for that. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Feel free to drop a donation or whatever at any point in time, because times are hard. Times are hard. But I'm sure they're hard for you too. And I'm pretty sure that everything's been great for you.